on to the second game of today as number 2 Washington beat number 3 Texas 37-31 in the Sugar Bowl. The game wasn't that close up until maybe about 5 minutes to go when Texas gets that touchdown to cut it to a one-score game. But or what was it? It was a field goal that cut it to a one-score game after Washington got their own field goal as well. Anyways, it was a lot closer down the stretch, and it was ultimately because a Washington player, one of their top receivers, he ends up getting hurt. It was Johnson, right? He ended up getting hurt within the last minute of the game. He ultimately, they have to call a timeout. That left about an extra 30 seconds for Texas, who drives all the way into the red zone, but ultimately they get shut out, and Washington holds on for the win 37-31 in the Sugar Bowl. They advance to the college football playoff championship game. And so we both picked, I picked Washington. You picked Texas in this game. And so what led to the Huskies pulling off the win here?
So pretty much going back to last week, I didn't give my pick, but I kind of was hinting that I was going to take Texas. We didn't have the show on Friday. But as you guys already known from the previous segment, that I had Alabama and definitely had Texas in kind of the rematch that it was supposed to be. But obviously that did not happen today. But kind of just going back to the game, I just think Washington's offense is very, very high powered. Penix threw for 430 today. Absolutely shredded the secondary of Texas. I think what the problem was for Texas, it was kind of just a mismatch throughout the entire game for Texas's secondary. And I mentioned this on last week's podcast. I said that kind of what would be the mismatch for Texas was Penix and his wide receivers, his trio that he has. I mentioned that if Washington is going to have a shot at winning this game, their receivers are going to have to go absolutely bonkers. And I mentioned Rome Odunze. Polk didn't really do. I mean, Polk he had 5 for 122, but McMillan was the other guy. Jalen McMillan was the other guy that I thought would get a little bit more involved, but it was Polk in this game. But Odunze is a top 10, 15 receiver.
He's him.
He is exact. Yes, he is him. I think what was, they were just able to get matchups, nightmares all over the field for these guys. You couldn't cover them, and it showed. Michael Penix is definitely shooting up on everybody's draft board. I'm not sure where he was before this game, but I remember that he was in. People were saying that he was going to be like a second-round pick. Like before,
Mel Kiper has him as his 5th ranked quarterback right now. Number 5.
Yeah, five guys better than Penix. I don't see it.
I know one, and his name is Caleb Williams. I know one. I don't know. I don't know if I'm taking Bo Nix over him. I don't know if I'm taking Jaden Daniels over him.
No, he's better than Bo Nix. I think he's better than Bo Nix. I think he's better than Jaden Daniels. The other guy that supposed to go over him is Drake May. That's what they're saying. That is true.
So maybe top 3, but top 5 seems a little too far.
If you just watch him play and his deep ball accuracy, his accuracy down the field is like top tier. Like he would be like, it'd be a dream for a bunch of NFL wide receivers to have Penix throwing him the ball. Just the way that he throws the ball down the field is uncanny, and it showed tonight. I thought Texas's defense would show up and be a little bit better than it was, but Penix kind of just ripped through anything that I thought Texas would have been able to do. Their run defense was it was okay for the most part, that being in Texas, but their secondary was getting torn. Now, it seems that they had a star safety who is a freshman. He was out for a half because he got called for a targeting call in the Big 12 title game, and he didn't come in until the second half of this game. I don't know if that would have changed anything, really. But Texas, it was a wild finish because at the end of the game, I feel like the difference in this game was definitely penalties and turnovers. Texas had they had 10 penalties. Washington had 5, and Texas had 2 turnovers. Washington had 1. That was the muff punt, and there were no turnovers on Michael Penix's end. It was the special teams turnover. But Texas having the turnover or losing the turnover battle, fumbling multiple times in that game, kind of giving Washington, chances to go up by 2 scores. And we were seeing that it was kind of come down to who was going to have the ball last. And if for a second there, it looked like Texas was. But kind of at the end, weird things kind of happened. You had the injury to a player, and that stops the clock because Washington has to use an injury timeout, saving like 30 seconds on the clock. And then Texas gets the kick catch interference, and that puts them in great field position. I think they started at the 30, and then Texas has the huge pass down the sideline, ultimately getting within, I think, to like the 12-yard line. Thought there was a genius call at the end by DeBoer. I don't think DeBoer is calling the defense, but they heated up Quinn Ewers at the end to kind of, throw him off balance. Didn't really give him that much time to throw. And he had at least a second left, which was insane. I thought the game was over. But if you watch the clock back, he got it in with at least 2 seconds left. Thought it was clever that he threw it to somebody on the sideline instead of like throwing it out of bounds, because that may or may not have taken like another second off the clock. So I thought that was pretty heady of him. But you saw, I think the 2 best receivers in this game were Roma Dunze and A.D. Mitchell. Another guy who I mentioned on last week's podcast, A.D. Mitchell, is Texas's wide receiver. I'm not sure if I think he's eligible. I feel
like Texas is going to bring back a lot of their main guys, because that's kind of what they were saying at the end of the broadcast. Is
for
like
Ewers,
Quinn Ewers could. Yeah,
I knew Ewers was going to come back because he already mentioned that he was going to come back this year. And, in the group chat, they were saying it's Arch time. And
Arch Manning's going to come to Ohio State because Quinn Ewers is going to stick around.
But A.D. Mitchell, that's kind of what you would have drawn up at the end. It was a hell of a play by the defensive back to make that play. It was kind of a tough catch because I get A.D. was trying to make the catch, but you could have argued that he could have jumped, but if he would have jumped to try and grab the pass, he probably would have been out of bounds. And that kind of went into the game. So he was trying to stay in bounds. The ball could have been placed a little bit better, but I guess the last play of the game, no timeouts left, 4th down, trying to go to the national championship. So a bunch is at stake there. So you got to give your hats off to Texas for basically fighting to literally the last exact play of the game. And a lot of NFL players on this field, from the quarterbacks to the receivers, the D-line. Sweat is going to be one of those guys too. I'm not sure if he's draft eligible, but he'll definitely be in the NFL. But I think with this win for Washington, you're kind of looking at the matchup between Washington and Michigan, who the odds are already out. Michigan is favored by, I'm saying 4.5, so about 4 points is what the spread is. Michigan is being favored. You're getting the tale of 2 polar opposite teams. You got a high-powered offense in Washington that can score, put up 500 yards in a game, and you got a team in Michigan that wants to run the shit out of the ball and manage the clock. And their defense is top-notch too as well. So we're going to see, man, bro, they might be on the hotline. I'm not even going to lie. This game might be on the hotline. But it's been a crazy weekend of football. I thought this was insane. I thought the committee got it right. There were a bunch of great bowl games too, going into not the Oregon game, but really there weren't really any good games today.
That Ohio State game on Friday was dog shit, and not just because they lost.
It was I thought there were a bunch of good bowl games, but just touching on the Missouri game, I did hint that Missouri was going to win in the group chat.
Yeah,
I'm looking at a bunch of the opt-outs. Ohio State didn't have as many opt-outs as I thought. They just had Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think they had a couple of injuries too. Plus, they had McCord injury and Devin Brown. He gets hurt, and so you guys have a fourth stringer in the game who doesn't know what he's a true freshman. Doesn't know what the fuck is going on. So, and then I just looked at Missouri's roster. They have a young team, but a lot of their dudes who are like sophomores are gonna go to the NFL next year. There's not draft eligible right now, so you got guys like Luther Burden and Brady Cook making plays all over the place. But Ohio State's defense, for the most part, was the key in this game. They were getting stops pretty much left and right. It was just their offense was unable to move the ball. So hats off to the Tigers. They're probably gonna. I think Missouri is gonna make the playoff next year in the 12-team playoff. I think they'll make the playoff for sure. They're one of the top 12 best teams in the country.
So if that's the case, I don't want to get off on a whole tangent here, but I got to follow up on this. If that's the case, how many teams out of the SEC are making the playoff?
Oh, no, it's going to be a bunch
Alabama.
It's going to be Big Ten.
Alabama, Georgia, Texas,
yeah,
Mizzou. That's 4 right there. Yeah, that's a third of the playoff.
There's going to be a shit ton of Big Ten and SEC teams in the playoff next year. I just want you'll see one Big 12 team.
Yeah. 10 out of 12 teams are going to be from those two conferences.
You'll get one from the ACC and one from the Big 12, and everybody else will probably just be from the SEC. I think. Now there might be maybe two or three from the other conferences. I'll say that. Maybe even 4.
All right.
From the other conferences, whether that's 3 from the Big 12 and 1 from the ACC, or 3 from the ACC and 1 from the Big 12, because it's starting to join. They're starting to become super conferences now. And pretty soon, it'll probably just be like the NFL, AFC versus NFC.
Exactly.
But whatever, it might be Big Ten versus SEC. That might be the 2 conferences that'll be left standing. But, yeah, next year can't come any sooner. But hats off to the Huskies and hats off to the Michigan Wolverines. It was an insane day of football. Couldn't be more happier. I was glued to my TV.
Yeah, me too. And I'm really looking forward to the expansion with the 12-team playoff and all those teams, whoever will be participating in next year's playoff. As we know, it's going to be on New Year's Day next year. Whoever makes it, that'll be revealed later this year, because here we are on January 1st, 2024. And so, Jaevon, before we get to the 12-team playoff, we do have to finish out with this 4-team playoff. And I just want to give a shout out to Uncle Manny real quick for always tapping in with us on YouTube. As he says, great evening of college football. Have a great show. We appreciate you, Uncle Manny. And so, Jaevon, it is on record that you picked Texas to defeat Alabama in the college football playoff championship game. That's obviously not going to happen now. And so let's just take a moment to make predictions for the college football playoff championship game between number 1 Michigan and number 2 Washington. As you noted earlier, some lines are different, but for right now, we're just going to say Michigan is favored -4 points. And so you can give us your betting take on it and also just the money line take of who you got winning this championship game, because I got the Huskies.
It's tough, man, because this matchup is it's polar opposite. So it's going to be Michigan's going to want to try and control the pace of the game by being able to run the ball. But they're going to have to be able to match the high-powered Washington offense. And Washington's kind of proved time and time again. And going back to the Pac-12, last Pac-12 championship game ever.
R.I.P.
That they were 10-point dogs going into that game. 10-point dogs. And I think they were plus like 300. Plus 300 dogs in that game, and kind of handled Oregon pretty handily. Now, Washington's defense isn't like they're going to hold you to 3 points, but they get timely stops, I think. And that's and I feel like that's kind of what they need. They don't need to, hold this team to do this and that, but I'm looking at this Michigan team against this Alabama team. Alabama has a solid defense, but Michigan doesn't really put up points like that. And I feel like they're going to need, I think everyone would believe that Penix is the better quarterback. So I would lean Huskies here. Just given off the fact that
I love it.
What I saw today from, guys like, I don't think anyone's going to be able to stop Roma Dunze at all. I think Penix can have a type of day similar to this, but I think Michigan's secondary is pretty good. I think they have a great front seven. I think Michigan will probably have like 15 dudes drafted from this team, which is a shit ton. They got a lot of NFL talent on this team, but I just think their offense. Like I watched Washington and like, who can stop this? Now Washington almost shot themselves in the foot late in the
Man,
game,
almost gave it
so
away.
it kind of goes back to the time of possession. Can Michigan be able to run? I think they'll be able to run on this Washington team. If it comes, I don't think Michigan wants to get into a shootout with this team. They want to be able to control the pace of the game. They want to be able to control the clock. And, McCarthy, he had the 3 touchdowns today, but he went 17 for like, 21, 17 or 22 today for like 220 yards. 222 yards through the air is not going to get it done against this.
You know what,
Washington
Will?
team.
430 yards like Michael Penix had tonight.
And
second most in a semifinal, only behind Joe Burrow. That's a good list to be on.
I'm just getting to the point where do I want to bet against Michael Penix Jr. And it has not went well. Did not go well for me today. But Penix, Polk, McClellan, those guys, man, they're just tough to stop. I would lean Washington here. Money line. They're plus 180. They're plus 180. So it's like Michigan would have to be able to control. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of it's McCarthy versus Penix. Who's the better quarterback? I think it's Penix by a mile, and it's not even close. And I don't see Michigan getting in a shootout with Washington. So it's going to be Michigan trying to run the ball, keep Penix off the field, limit his possessions. And that's the only way I would see Michigan being able to win. Because if Penix gets the ball, scores like first drive, that puts pressure on Michigan to be like, oh shit, like we can't just run the ball. Like let's just say Washington comes out, scores first drive of the game. It's 7-0. Okay. Shit. Michigan has to come down and score. They don't. They punt the ball back to Washington. Washington gets the ball back again and scores. It's 14-0. Their whole game plan changes. So I'm just going back to like today. I'm looking at offenses like the Tennessee Iowa game today was the Nico. I can't really pronounce his last name. He's like Samoan. He's Pacific Islander, who I think is going to be the guy that's going to be next up as one of the like top college quarterbacks, just going into next year. They played against Iowa today, and Iowa basically can't move the ball. And I'm not saying that Michigan can't move the ball, but I'm kind of going on it as a standpoint of you got a prolific type offense versus like a team that's built to like stop the run, run the ball pretty solidly, and you have a game manager type quarterback. Michael Penix is more of a game changer, kind of quote Cam Newton here, but and then I'm looking at it from Oregon. They kind of just steamrolled their quarterback's pretty solid in Bo Nix. But I'm looking at Washington, and it's like, how the fuck are you going to stop this offense? I get their defense isn't up to par, but it's going to be like, all right, like we can get into a shootout with you guys, and we believe that we're going to be able to score more points than you. And I think Michigan has the better defense, probably has the better team, but I'm looking at this offense like, hey, offense can get their defense can get timely stops. They can force turnovers. They proved that today. They forced turnovers. They didn't really have that many penalties. They had 5 throughout the whole entire game, and this offense is putting up 500 yards plus. So like, let's look at what did
Real quickly, I'll just say that the Tennessee quarterback that you were alluding to with the Samoan last name is Nico Imaliva, the funniest name in this transfer portal era.
He's a true freshman. So he's gonna be, I'm telling you, you can stamp me right now. He's gonna be one of them ones coming, like top quarterbacks like coming out. draft, NFL, like he's gonna be that. He's gonna be
Does
that for sure.
does he finish his career though at Tennessee, or does he play into the last name and enter the portal?
I think so. I think he's staying
Okay.
in Tennessee.
We shall see. Regardless of where he is, I believe you.
He should have played this year, to be honest. Like, I just think it was just a politicky thing. They already had Joe Millen. They were promising. He'd been there for a while. He had transferred from Michigan and was kind of promised the job, and ended up getting the year to start. But I think Nico, he's gonna be one of the ones for sure. But no, Michigan had 300. They had 130 rush yards versus 221 pass yards. So 351 yards total. Washington had a total of, it was like, 532 yards. So that's 200 more yards than today. I'm just looking at it from Michigan's going to have to match Washington's offense, and that's going to be a problem. And I think the matchups that they have on Washington is going to be like you got mismatches, like you got 3 NFL receivers on your team versus I think Roman Wilson will definitely be an NFL wide receiver, but it's kind of you got Blake Corum, you have Roman Wilson, you have McCarthy, who's more of a game manager. Can he elevate to like you can go blow for blow with Michael Penix? I don't see that happening. So I would lean Washington in this game.
Yeah, I do think that JJ McCarthy could, just based on how they were able to come back late in this game. That made me believe. I've always liked JJ McCarthy, but even as an Ohio State fan, but as much as I don't want to like, yeah, he sure is, never lost. But after what I saw from JJ McCarthy today in the biggest of situations, I do think that he could go blow for blow with Michael Penix. But the thing I would say in regard to that is how long can he go blow for blow with him? Because if you go back and forth 5-6 times and it's 42-42, that's great. But if Michael Penix lands the knockout shot, it's not going to matter in the end. And so I do think he can keep up with him, but whether or not he would keep up with him enough, and if that Michigan defense can force a Michael Penix turnover, that's where Michigan could ultimately win this championship game. But, I'm going with the Huskies. I picked the Huskies to win it all last week, just not really because of any logic or reasoning other than just my own fan bias. But I'm sticking with my pick. I'm sticking with the Huskies. Let's go, UW. And real quickly, Jaevon, before we move on here on episode number 71 of Stats Over Politics, I just wanted to read off an Instagram comment since, we are live on Instagram.
We are live on Instagram, by the way. So
it's a thing. It's happening. Tap in. We appreciate everyone who's been tapped in with us as well. As Sincerely Sway says on Instagram, came to check on Kevin. He all right, man? It's rough in Philly. And, Kevin is doing all right. It has been rough in Philly, but he's taking care of his puppy tonight. And so family comes first, and the puppy's definitely a part of the family. And so got to prioritize the family, even though it has been tough for him and the Eagles as of late. After that 10-1 start, they have lost 4 out of their last 5 games. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. But Sway also says, I think you're shortchanging Michigan's defense. Michigan's defense, I do think that they'll have something to say about Michael Penix next week. But Jaevon and I are both picking the Huskies. Now moving on, Jaevon, here on episode number 70.
4:30 in a semifinal game. That's all I'm going to say, man. Like that's really good. When your quarterback plays
pretty damn good.
When your quarterback plays that well, I'm inclined to think that he's going to be able to touch up Michigan's defense. So we'll see.
We shall see.
Really good though. Very, very, very good.
They certainly are, and they definitely showed that in the first half of today's game and late in the game when it truly mattered. So we shall see, and we'll be back here on Stats Over Politics next week, January 8th, immediately following the championship game to recap it all. So make sure to tap in with us for that. So now, Jaevon, moving on here on episode number 71 of Stats Over Politics, Shaun Holko alongside Jaevon Toddy, Kevin Dent, and Garry Singh will be rejoining us again soon. Let's move on to the professionals and the next level being the NFL. I think this might be the first or second time since the NFL season started that we have not led with the NFL here on Stats Over Politics, but college football playoff, pretty important. That was the focus of today, being the first day of 2024. So had to cover that in depth. Now moving on to the NFL. Let's recap week 17 in the NFL, Jaevon. And, you got two 49ers fans sitting right here. So no better way to start than
49ers.
Number one seed in the NFC, as the 49ers beat the Commanders 27-10 in the nation's capital on Sunday morning. And not only that, Jaevon, but after the game, the 49ers went back to the locker room. They all huddled around a small TV or their own phones to watch the end of the Eagles game, because the Cardinals beat the Eagles 35-31, which was ultimately what led to the 49ers clinching a week early. I was saying, as well as James in our Stats Over Politics Fantasy Football League group chat, I was saying Merry Clinchmas, because I thought that next week's game against the Rams was going to be for the number one seed. But, the Cardinals, they helped us out. And so we'll get to the Cardinals defeating the Eagles next. But, Jaevon, let's start with the 49ers beating the Commanders 27-10. What were your thoughts on this one?
I don't think anyone really doubted that the Niners would lose this game or that the Niners wouldn't win. It was just a matter of would they be able to cover the spread or not, and they did. They were 2 touchdown favorites. Purdy played an awesome game. He leads. He's the all-time leading passer in 49ers in single season 49er history. He leads. He's the last pick in the draft. He is the number one passer for a single season. That's with a guy that, I don't know, Jeff Garcia. Jeff Garcia was the former holder of that record. But, there's guys like Joe Montana and Steve Young. I don't know if you guys ever heard of those guys. Won a couple of Super Bowls, but that's neither here nor there. Brandon Ayuk, 1,300-yard receiver. You got guys like George Kittle and Deebo Samuel.
Not 1,000. 1,300.
1,300. Okay. You got guys like the best tight end in the league, George Kittle, has 1,000 scrimmage yards, and you have Deebo Samuel, who has 1,000 scrimmage yards. You got Christian McCaffrey, who was a little bit banged up in this game, has 1,400 rushing yards. So we got to see Elijah Mitchell. But Purdy, the game manager, he had 230 yards, 2 touchdowns.
I would say that Brock Purdy, he's pretty relevant now as the top passer in 49ers history.
I think he's pretty relevant. Wasn't really a surprise for this game. It was kind of